Hi, I'm AP, and you're watching Cinema Literate. Today, I'm going to be doing a basic breakdown of a scene. If you're someone who loves watching movies for entertainment, but is maybe looking to get a bit more out of the viewing experience, this is a great place to start. I'm going to break down a scene from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, directed by David Fincher, and go over a few key points to hit when analyzing a scene. We'll be looking at things like exposition, dialogue, and blocking to find out how you can uncover information and have a more immersive experience when watching a film. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or Men Who Hate Women as the original Swedish title is translated, follows disgraced journalist Mikael Blomqvist and the very distinct hacker Elizabeth Salander as they investigate the murder of retired CEO Henrik Wagner's niece. Naturally, I thought that this would be a perfect scene to investigate and break down. The opening scene will break down introduces our protagonist Lisbeth to the world, along with supporting characters Drogan Armansky, who heads Milton Security where Elizabeth unofficially works, and Dirk Frode, the former lawyer for the Wagner Corporation. Good writing will have a character doing something at their introduction, so that we, the audience, can infer a couple of things about them. Importantly, where they are, as in their state of mind. What type of person are they, so that we know where they need to get. Now, this is a scene breakdown, so I'll save the writing tutorial for another video. At the start of this scene, Drogan says,
"It's possible we could wait forever."
In the Swedish culture, being late in general, but especially to a business meeting of this stature, is distinctly frowned upon, being considered very rude. So we can already begin inferring the type of person Lisbeth is, and we haven't even seen her on screen yet. The fact that she is making her boss, and more importantly her boss's client wait, does not bode well for the company. Let's notice the way David Fincher has blocked Drogan. He's facing out from the table and away from Dirk. Drogan wants a clear path out. He's also placed in the lower right quadrant of the frame, below Dirk, who sits into the table and is framed in the top left quadrant of the frame. Right at the start, we see who owns this scene. Also, notice the angle of the camera. It's placed high, looking down on Dirk and Drogan, almost in a voyeuristic sense, like we're watching them and they're not aware of it. We've become snoops, just like Lisbeth and Mikael. Another thing to note, our first viewing of Drogan, we only see his back. We're not getting a full picture of him. There's something he's hiding. When we see Lisbeth in her first close-up, we see that she has this in common with Drogan. On the contrary, with Dirk, we can see him. Now, look at how Fincher frames Drogan in this shot. He is in complete profile, and his shoulder and back have precedence. More on that in a bit. Listen to what Drogan says about Lisbeth here.
"You like her? Very much."
Our first clue to Drogan and Lisbeth's relationship. Dirk simply asks Drogan if he likes Lisbeth, to which he responds, very much. His next line is pertinent when he says this.
"She's one of the best investigators I had, as you saw from her report."
Had is the clue we need to start building off of. Lisbeth works off the books. You can tell that Lisbeth doesn't frequent these offices during regular hours because this guy looks at Lisbeth like he's never seen her before, along with this guy. Also, Drogan says this.
"No one here particularly likes her."
Here's what's interesting. Lisbeth has an access card, but it's how she uses the card that gives us another clue. She swipes the card so easily, like it's second nature to her. Not only that, but we can infer that she comes here often, because of the habitual path she takes when navigating the corridors. She has only one place to be, only one place she ever has to be when coming here. Notice how Elizabeth repulses everyone away from her by her harsh exterior, making no eye contact with anyone. We can understand how she feels about her world. Exposition through blocking and design. Check this out. In this next beat, Lisbeth is caught by surprise when she finds Drogan and Dirk in the conference room. Remember when I said Lisbeth only ever has one place to go when here? It's not the conference room. This is another clue into Lisbeth and Drogan's relationship, getting closer to the payoff. Lisbeth had no idea she was coming here for a meeting with a client. That's proven here.
"But you told her I wanted to meet with her." "But I've told her many more times I prefer her not to meet clients."
Drogan evades Dirk's question. We can safely assume Lisbeth thought she was coming here for a completely different reason. Look at Drogan's action. His finger showing her into the room, almost like a parent sending a child to the room for punishment. Now this is great. Watch what Fincher does here with the camera. As Drogan rises, he tilts the camera up with him, elevating Drogan, giving him power over Lisbeth. But then we see Dirk rise in the foreground, and the camera tilts up one more level, even higher, reminding us who owns this scene. This is how exposition is done. The very next beat, Drogan sits, followed by Dirk, and again the camera tilts down on Dirk's action. We don't even see Lisbeth take her seat. David Fincher is letting us know whose scene this is, whose perspective we need to take, whose side we should be on, and it isn't Lisbeth's. Fincher is, however, setting up Lisbeth's arc. We should be disgusted by her at the beginning of the film. We don't even get a clear shot of her face until the moment of surprise when Drogon beckons her into the room. So how can we relate to a character who's been avoiding us, just like she's been avoiding everyone else in her world? She doesn't want anything to do with us. This is her mindset. This is where Lisbeth is at, and we now can begin to see where she has to get in order to become a fully realized character. Okay, now, Lisbeth's first line of dialogue.
Something wrong with the report?
It's an accusation against herself. Did I do something wrong? This tells us so much about her psychology and what she thinks of herself. She's worried she's in trouble. Though we are supposed to be put off by Lisbeth, this line opens the door to sympathy for the character. We can judge her less and begin watching her with curious eyes. Look at her blocking, hands in her lap, eyes to the ground, not even addressing the authorities in the room. Not only that, but notice how she sat in the chair. She sits away from the table, keeping a clear path out. Sound familiar? This is yet another clue into Drogon and Lisbeth's relationship. They are positioned in the same way. There's something about these two we are coming to understand. This next bit of dialogue is interesting as well.
Something wrong with the report?
Oh, it was quite thorough. But I'm also interested in what's not in it.
There's nothing not in it.
Your opinion of him isn't?
Dirk is pleased with her report on Mikkel, but he's curious as to what's not in it. Lisbeth's response is defensive, so we can infer that she takes pride in her work. It's probably the only thing she does have confidence in, and Dirk questions her skill. This is another key into this character. Another bit of understanding for us. What happens next is stunning. Dirk asks her for her opinion of Mikkel, and she responds with,
I'm not paid to give my opinion.
So you don't have one?
Notice who Lisbeth delivers that line to.
I'm not paid to give my opinion.
So you don't have one?
When watching this, I initially asked myself, why did she look at Drogon, and why did Fincher give him a single close-up there? Let's continue. Drogon silently scolds Lisbeth, and she responds by turning away, once again delivering her line and opinion of Mikkel to no one.
He's clean in my opinion.
But why does she look away when delivering this line? It seems to me that she's trying to avoid something or someone. The conversation they're having is clearly about Mikkel, but what's her body language saying? What's the subtext? What or who does the subtext say this conversation could potentially be about? Fincher is clearly setting the tone of this film. We can clearly see through his blocking that Lisbeth is pitted against two men, and that it's an uneven fight, something we can infer she's dealt with her whole life. Fincher, through blocking and design, is giving us more insight into Lisbeth's character, and the overall themes of the film. The injustices men have placed on women.
He's clean in my opinion.
You mean he's hygienic?
Dirk responds with a somewhat condescending comment, and Lisbeth then responds with this.
He's who he presents himself to be. In his business, that's an asset.
She once again slams this line at Drogon.
Get it, girl. You throw that shade.
This is huge insight into Lisbeth and Drogon's relationship. Watch what Drogon does with his thumbs. In an incredibly nuanced performance by Goran Vishnik, you can feel the tension rise, and we can start to see another story in the subtext of the performances. David Fincher is known to do up to 50 plus takes on a scene, and it's so he can get performances like that. The little nuances, the things that show us what a character is about. Immediately following this, Fincher makes his first major cut on Lisbeth. Look familiar? She is frame right, looking left and completely profile, with her shoulder and back taking precedence. This is the biggest clue into their relationship. What does it mean? Framing them in the exact same way shows us that they are equal and that they share something, perhaps a common secret. What's the secret? I'll get back to that in a second. Having their backs framed in a prominent position also shows that they're both willing to turn their backs on each other. We know this when in the beginning, Drogon sells her short by saying,
I find it's much better if she works from home.
and we saw this just now from Lisbeth's point of view, but more passive-aggressively.
He's who he presents himself to be.
This is war. Instead of squaring up toe-to-toe, Fincher found a creative and unorthodox way to show two lions circling each other. This is the scene within the scene. This is what makes David Fincher so good. Okay, hold tight, we're almost done. After discussing briefly Mikkel's financial situation, Lisbeth gets up to exit. As she does, the camera now tilts up with her, showing us that the scene dynamic has changed and we are now viewing it from her perspective. We have been given enough information to side with her. Dirk asks her if there's any information that she has excluded from the report, and then there's a pause.
Anything you chose not to disclose?
Nothing that warranted inclusion.
That pause says so much, and it's earned. She has the power to turn her back on Drogon and expose their secret, but she decides not to. This is a game of cat and mouse now. She delivers her line, and then, right at the tail end, she looks right at Drogon, taunting him yet again. Fantastic editing, holding out for the best delivery of the story being told. The next cut, Drogon begins to speak, and notice what he says.
I think what Miss Solander means, and I agree, is that everyone has a right to a certain amount of privacy, even if they're being investigated.
He calls her bluff right back, speaking for her, and you can see him begin to move forward in his chair. The entire scene, Drogon is either sat back in his seat or has been overshadowed by Dierk. We cut back to Drogon, now completely pressing forward as he delivers the first part of his line to Lisbeth, taunting her back, and the last part of the line to Dierk, almost desperately. But what do these two have in common that needs so much privacy? Next, we get another major cut, but to Dierk. We see him in a medium and in a completely new angle as he turns to tell Drogon that he needs to know everything about him he might find unsavory. But who does Fincher want us to investigate here? Mikkel or Drogon? She now owns this scene. So what's the common secret that Drogon and Lisbeth share? Well, I'll let Lisbeth tell you.
He's had a long-standing sexual relationship with his co-editor of the magazine.
The way Fincher framed Lisbeth is interesting as well. We can't quite tell who she's looking at. Who is she delivering this line to? Dierk or Drogon? The next bit of editing is fantastic as well. Like any great joke, it needs a strong setup so that it has an earned punchline, and that's what happens here. So, Lisbeth has just told us of the affair, then we cut back to the two-shot of Dierk and Drogon, and then Fincher edits to a new and closer single of Lisbeth for the punch.
Sometimes he performs cunnilingus. Not often enough, in my opinion.
Lisbeth looks right into frame at us, so that we can feel the momentum she has in the scene. Breaking the fourth wall is a great technique that can be used to add weight to a moment. Fincher edits back to the close-up single of Drogon for his reaction, basically admitting to he and Lisbeth's affair. Fincher lives with the idea that humans are perverts, so could this be a weird kind of foreplay between the two? I mean, she's capable of feeling for another man, as she does so for Mikkel later. Also, later in the film when Drogon is meeting with Mikkel, he speaks of Lisbeth with a vulnerable sincerity. Take a look.
The reason you can find no record of her is because her records have been sealed. She's a ward of the state.
What's that got to do with anything?
She's had a rough life. Can we please not make it any rougher?
It sounds to me like he might actually care for her as well. Finally, we finish the scene with Dierk saying,
No, you're right not to include that.
and we end on her profiled close-up. From here on out, we are totally on Lisbeth's side for the rest of the film. We know who she is, a timid yet genius recluse with no mind for authority or the world around her. Where she comes from, a hacker who works off the books and seeks securities through a discreet relationship with her unofficial boss. From this, we can infer where she has to get to have a complete character arc. You may think that this kind of investigation takes a long time and you would rather just sit and enjoy the movie, but when you know what to look for and how to look for it, with practice, you too can learn how to read movies and become cinema literate. For more specific film form analysis videos, subscribe to this channel. I'll be teaching you what to look for, and more importantly, how to look for it. Thanks. If you'd like to support this channel, you can become a patron by clicking the link below.